Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. The text for today. I have never felt more patriotic than I did this past Tuesday, as I stood on a platform in front of 1,000 people with my back to the Supreme Court and proclaimed that people of faith are not all against abortion. I went to D.C. to lead my Planned Parenthood clergy group, our national convening of faith leaders, to do theological work on reproductive justice. By chance, we landed as Alabama and Georgia were celebrating bills that would outlaw abortion and criminalize the procedure. I say by chance, but my Christian colleague from San Diego said it was divine providence. We spent the morning in discussion about moving the dialogue from choice to moral decision-making. We said it was the moral work of a woman to decide to mother or parent a child or not. That we believe is a divinely inspired decision. That as people of free will, as people capable of making moral decisions, we as people of faith should stand up for this right. We talked about how anti-abortion rhetoric was founded in the evangelical movement following the failure of the Bob Jones University's protection of segregation. It was precisely at the moment when the Supreme Court decided against Bob Jones's segregationist policy that a team of the moral majority got together and, seeking political power, asked the question, what about abortion? At that time, churches like First Baptist downtown here in Dallas were pro-choice, until by seeing the way to influencing our political system overnight, they became anti-abortion. We talked about how this movement to keep women, mostly poor women of color, from making the most private decision of their lives was a tactic forged in segregationist offices and now rises before us posed as a legitimate debate. And as I stood in front of the highest court in our land with my back to the female statues of justice who hold the scales and deliberation who watches on, I never felt more patriotic and I never felt more at peace. I stood there and felt the sacred peace descend over me. I felt the women of this church who studied a woman's rights, which literally led to the Roe v. Wade case, by my side. I stood there with Pat Davidson, God rest her soul, and Louise Raggio, God rest her soul, and others, and I felt them and you standing with me as I told the story of this church, reminding the crowd that people of faith believe in a woman's agency over their body. I felt a peace also, peace that the world does not give easily. My heart untroubled, God with me, a holy presence, because I knew if God is anything, God is a crosser of boundaries. God stands with the just and the poor and the downtrodden. I was reminded that these words attributed to Jesus, peace I leave with you, was more a statement of hope than a statement of reality. He knew the world would be chaotic, that if done right, the life of faith would mean a fair amount of struggle and pain, and that peace would be in short supply. He knew that when his people questioned their government, a government that lined the streets to Jerusalem with the crucified resistors' bodies, that they would not back down if they could access a peace that no one could take and no one could give. That in some way, what he meant when he said, "Peace I give to you, peace I leave with you," was that he was sending his disciples out to face the world, not to prop up the powerful or the rich or the state, but to stand by the poor and the oppressed. The one thing that they would need to do that was a peace that no one could give and no one could take away. I never felt more patriotic and more peaceful than I did on Tuesday, standing with the rally of people with the signs that read, "Trust women," and "My body, my choice," because I felt a holy hand on me. And in my head was the quote from James Baldwin that says, "I love America more than any country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." Now, Jesus never talked about patriotism, but I think he would understand this. The reason I felt so patriotic on Tuesday. Now, I was tempted to preach today on Memorial Day and its meanings before this all happened, but I realized something deeper was calling me. Something about the need to memorialize life and take a moment to reflect on our country now. Memorial Day is the honoring of the soldiers who died in war. I will honor them tomorrow in the style of the reading from James Carroll, who reminded us that the dead are the loss of our future. Who reminded us that we need to revivify the human longing for the end of war, generation in and generation out. I love his line, "Remembering is not enough." We must remember that war is what took our future from us. And as a people of faith, we must always stand for peace in the world when we can. I'm thinking today of what needs our memorial attention. My list of things we might consider creating memorials to include the war dead. I have my own family members to remember tomorrow. But also includes a list of losses in our country that are hard to understand if we will get back. Loss of our integrity with the rest of the world is on that list. Loss of the environmental destruction and species depletion that we have contributed to, or our inability to see beyond our own immediate needs. The loss of civility in politics, of common dialogue, of bridge building, the loss of individual responsibility for the quality of our country, the loss of a conscience or desire for unity. In some ways, the erosion of our ability to be critically patriotic in the face of a growing nationalism. Those are on my list to build memorials to. And to say that we are living in a country which leans toward nationalism is perhaps an understatement. When I say that, I mean that the patriot seeks to draw us together, and the nationalist promotes fear of others. And we have too much of the latter at the moment. Our conscience as a country seems dulled by extremism in politics and the wholesale of political agendas that waste our tax dollars, like legislating who can and cannot use what bathroom, or whether we can give a doctor life imprisonment for performing a legal medical procedure. And these issues have been sold to religion and become banners that are hanging outside of churches, strictly for the reason to get us to the polls. Yes, we can memorialize the American conscience today. But days like Memorial Day should beg us to consider our response to our country. Memorial Day shouldn't be something that props up a false patriotism or used to increase nationalism. If patriotism is something that draws us together and nationalism draws us to fear others, I will choose patriotism. But I also think patriotism is not blind faith in our country. It should, as Baldwin said, encourage us to criticize and dialogue. It should allow us to redefine Memorial Day, at least momentarily in church, at least for the exercise of thinking deeply about what our country is and has become. And it should have us become more conscious of the need for peace and orient us to those who suffer the losses of war. Peace should be an orientation of Memorial Day, as it is with the beginnings of Mother's Day, and it is with the beginnings of the armistice of Veterans Day. Memorial Day might remind us of the spiritual side that we are responsible for, a peace that Jesus points to in the reading today that is not just about the cessation of conflict, but that peace is a gift of God. Something we sense most keenly when we give over a sense of control of all things that we worry about. True peace arrives when we recognize there are limits to what we can affect or achieve on our own. When we know our limits. When we place ourselves, our loved ones, our fortunes, our future into the moments we live in and lift our gaze from the troubles that plague us and see those around us as gifts of God, worthy of our love and our attention. It happens when we realize again that life is fragile, that all this is temporary, that the churn of the world is not ours to control, that standing in the midst of life sometimes means standing up for what we believe, knowing we will receive resistance, but that we will never be alone or unloved or lost if we attend to the very moments we live in. It's standing on the stage in front of thousands or next to the recovery bed of a loved one. It's standing in the midst of a chaotic family and seeing the world turn, but knowing that we are actors on the stage with exits and entrances, as the bard put it. And that is the location of peace in those moments of awareness. Peace from the spiritual point of view, or those brief pauses in the fray of everyday life and the constant need to compete and secure and hoard and protect. I wonder how often we really sense the depth of this gift of peace. The promise that no matter what happens, we are loved and not abandoned. I wonder how many people need, crave, and covet this kind of peace today. How often have we sought it only to find it elusive? How often have we accepted what the world offers as peace only to discover it a counterfeit promise? I wonder if we can declare that peace isn't something you can seek or grasp, but only receive in your attentiveness to your life. That only as we release our grip on the many things we are trying to hold on to and control, do we discover our open hands actually receive the gift of peace and know a peace that is beyond this world. The good news in this is that we believe we can receive a great peace that guides our lives, our days, and our work for justice, that peace is within us and beyond us. It demands that even as we stand for what we believe is just and right, that we look across and see those who maybe don't agree with our side. And instead of believing they are bad because they disagree, believing they are good because they are also children of God. And that can be applied right here in this sanctuary, in your homes, and on the stage in front of the Supreme Court. As I stood on that stage Tuesday, I could see the opposition on the other side of the street with their signs that read, "A baby has rights to," and "Life matters," and all manners of things. I did not feel fear or hatred or scorn for them. I felt compassion. I felt understanding that they too felt strongly about something. I knew if I led with the peace that held me in that moment, I might actually reach them through the fray of the yelling and the threats. I knew that if we could feel a peace so great, we might not fight over each other's bodies after all. We might not claw at the political territories all religion has warned us about, those forces of power that supplant the power of the holy. I knew that if I could lead with peace, I might learn to trust the world and God and life's ebbs and flows, and know that they are not mine to control. It doesn't mean that we don't fiercely attend to our convictions in all manners of justice, but it does mean that as Unitarian Universalists, we can know a great love that guides our lives with the plow of peace that cuts through the desire to fight or demonize each other. That is the spiritual work. To do this, we're going to have to find the center in ourselves that does not hold others with contempt, fear, or hatred. It's something like grace. It's something like the act of forgiveness. It's something like attending to this fragile life we are all living right now. I have always believed that the church, standing beyond the state's grasp, teaches us how to access these deeper places of ourselves, these spiritual places that we ignore. One way the church does this in many traditions is the practicing of the passing of peace, which we don't do very often. Where in the pews, people turn to each other and say, "Peace be with you." And the return is, "And also with you." We have rarely practiced this except for at communion on Christmas Eve. And so we need this practice. And I'm going to ask you to turn to somebody in your pew and say to them, "Peace be with you." And in return, receive, "And also with you." Will you do that now? May you know peace today. Peace that exists right here in this moment, because we are here together in the presence of God. We know that in each other is the core goodness that we must access in all we do.